Hi, this is Aki and I want to give you a short introduction to our new DragonWraith figure and also show you in a short tutorial how to use the dForce compliant assets like these body and skull ribbons, the tail membranes and the wing membranes of this figure. First, if you want to load your DragonWraith, you will have to look in the Animals folder under Aki DragonWraith. And there you will find all these pieces and assets we have saved for the figure. First is the DragonWraith base skeleton, and we also have prepared a DragonWraith dForce ready set, which is a scene subset which will load the DragonWraith, the ribbons, the tail membranes and the wing membranes into the scene at once, so you don't have to go and look for every single piece. First of all, the DragonWraith can also be turned into a wyvern, which is a dragon without the front shoulder blades and the front limbs. You simply do that by selecting your DragonWraith base and then click on this Properties preset. And this simply hides these front limbs. You can use all the poses of the DragonWraith which were built for it on this wyvern as well. Should work without a problem. Okay, so let's look at the pieces we included here. Well, the first interesting piece is these geographed for the horns. Here they are. And these horns load with control dials which enable you to move them, and these dials will move both horns at once, but you can also select the individual horns and move them on their own. That is not a problem. Okay, the next piece I want to show you is these jewel eyes. They look a bit frightening or scary, and we included them because we thought it would be pretty cool to have something like that in an undead dragon skeleton. And same as the horns, they also come with these control dials which allow you to move the eyes in the skull, and they will also move both eyes simultaneously. Next is the skull cap. I'm going to talk about the ribbons in a few moments. And the skull cap was built to fit the skull on its own, so when I would delete these horns, it would fit smoothly over the back. But we also included a morph to make them fit to these geographed horns, so that's not a problem. The next piece is these horn ends, horn lances, which is a combination or a hybrid of jewelry and weapons, and they fit to the horns and will also follow their movements. Okay, so these are the independent accessories which you can add or leave as you like. The dForce compliant pieces are these ribbons. I'm going to load them all into my scene here to show you. So please don't be surprised if you at first don't see anything of the tail membranes and the wing membranes, because the shader is set up in a way so you cannot see them in the preview mode, but you should be able to see them when you want to work with dForce. And for this I included two base blank materials which can be found under Materials Array, and when you apply them, the membranes become visible. So this is the preset you will be working with when you will set up a dForce simulation. So this might be a bit time intensive and you want to start working right away, loading first the base and then all the dForce assets. So we included a scene subset which will simply load the dragon, the membranes and the ribbons into the scene at once. The only thing you now need to do is to apply these base materials to them. So this would be your base setup to start working. One thing I want to point out is that you do not have to be worried about these body handles here. They exist to make your life a bit easier when you want to pose these long bone chains of neck and tail, but they are set up to be invisible and they will not cast shadows, they will not be visible in a render, and they will not be visible in a dForce simulation. This invisible in render does not apply when you switch your preview mode to NVIDIA iRay. You will be able to see them. If you want to hide them because they are in the way or you do not wish to look at them all the time, there's also material presets which will hide the handles. So here you go, you have your clean skeleton. So now let's come to the interesting part, how you set up a dForce simulation. First of all, the ribbons and these two membrane parts have been set up to work with dForce right away. They have dForce modifiers applied to them, so the only thing you will have to do is set up an animation and let it run. One more thing though, both the membrane parts and the ribbons have been set up to work with basic manipulations and rotations. First, you can move these ribbons. As you see here, we have provided a lot of movement dials for them. And the same goes for the tail spikes in the back, so you can move them up and down. They are rigged so they will follow basic movements. The wing membranes have these spikes here built into them, which is the attachment point for the bodyboard end of the membranes, because obviously with a skeleton you have no place where the wing membranes could be attached to, because all the muscle and flesh is missing. And you can also move them either independently of each other or together at once with these highlighted dials here. So back to setting up your dForce simulation. What you would need is your animation timeline down here, and for a decent simulation I recommend 31 or 41 frames. Let's just leave it with 31. You will probably need more when you want the ribbons to drape nicely, so I'm setting this up, but you only need so many when you have the ribbons in the scene. For the membranes, only 31 or 41 will be quite enough. So let's look for a nice pose for the dragon. We have a few here. There are either the ones provided by Riversoft Art, who has his poses and his DragonWraith Pose Master available as a separate product in the store, or you have the poses created by Feral Fae, which you can see here. But there is one specialty provided with Feral Fae poses, which I will show you at the end of this video. First thing you might want to do when you're working with this figure is to turn the limits off, because some of the rotations exceed the built-in limits of the skeleton to achieve more realism. Okay, so now scrub forward to frame 10 and select a nice pose. Let's say I like this one, growling right. Okay. And then click on this little key icon with a plus inside, which will add a new keyframe. You see there are now two markers here, these black arrow things. at frame 0 and frame 10, and that means that DaStudio has set a keyframe on both frames. The first defines the 0 default position for the skeleton, and the second defines the new pose which we want to have as our target end pose for this skeleton. Now, what you might want to do now is to adjust a few bits in here, because you see the wing spike on the right side. When it stays like this, you will end up with the pokes of the spine through the membrane, and you might want to avoid this. So go to your wing membranes, to the controls, pick your right wing and move the wing spike out of the way, the right wing. Okay, so this is done, and this is also, I hope, yeah, it is memorized in this frame. You might also want to change the look of this tail fin a little bit. So for this simulation, I'm just going to move the spines up a bit, just a bit. Okay, so we now have set everything for our base simulation. You also notice that the camera is moving when I scrub through my timeline. Well, obviously DAS also set keyframes for the camera. You can either remove them or just ignore them completely and switch to an independent view like I always do. This is the perspective view, which isn't linked to a camera. And when you stay in the same scene and don't save and reload it, you will be just fine. So you have your fixed view now for your simulation. When I go through the timeline again, you see my view stays static and doesn't do anything. Okay, so this is what you need, and the next thing you will do is you go to your simulation tab, which you will find under Windows Simulation Settings. You have to do a few adjustments here. First, switch off this Start Bones from Memorized Pose. Frames to simulate has to be changed too. It has to obviously be set to use timeline play range for an animation. And set the collision mesh resolution to viewport, because there is some subdivision on these membranes, both wing and tail. So leave the rest as it is and then simply hit the simulate button. Okay, so now let's look at our result we get after the simulation. You notice that I have shortened this one because 40 frames were everything I needed. It looks kind of funny. Because the ribbons wrap around the head and the neck, and that's because I have this swing of the head and neck to the side during the simulation. If you wanted the ribbons to hang straight down, you would have to alter the simulation and just run a single frame one. Just set your skeleton into your desired end pose in frame 1 and then just simulate that one frame, this current frame. Then you will end up with nicely draping ribbons which hang down pretty straight. The benefit of simulating with an animation timeline is that you can scrub back through your timeline and just pick the one frame you like best in terms of movement of the dForce assets. So this looks like a little bit wind-blown, and this definitely looks more settled. But there's another way too. If you want to spare yourself all this time and work, I can only highly recommend Feral Face Drago Osseous product, which I've already mentioned because this pose is taken out of this set. The product comes not only with these 20 base poses here, but also with matching hierarchical pose presets. and they load not only the pose of the skeleton but also morphs for the ribbons and for the membranes, which have been pre-simulated and then later cleaned up before we added them as morphs to the membranes and the ribbons. And how this works, I will just show you quickly. You load your dForce ready preset as shown. Going to make the membranes visible. And then go to your presets folder, be sure to apply your limits off utility here. Okay, and then just click on one of these 20 presets. There we go. Everything draped nicely and cleaned up. So this is the second, a bit more convenient solution, and that's also the reason why I highly recommend this product. These are custom built poses and morphs for this dragon skeleton figure. If you want, you can now add horns and one of the other accessories. You can, by the way, still manipulate the positions of the tail spines back here or one of the wing spikes. You can still, let me do this here, you see it follows nicely. You can still alter the wing movement a little bit to a degree. The simulated membranes will follow. I'm going to use that left wing fingers curl dial here, you see, that still works. You have to be a bit careful with this, just observe what is happening to the membrane when you do this sort of thing, but normally you shouldn't have a problem. And that's something that gives you a little bit more flexibility with this product. But I would recommend all the changes you want to make, you should add to frame 1 for a still animation, for a still simulation for dForce, or in the frame you set your target position. In our example, that would be frame number 10. Also, if you want to add morphs, because the dragon skeleton comes with a few style morphs like thicker ribs, a bit more mean looking skull, larger feet, thicker bones in general, and larger hands, you should also dial them in frame 1 for your still frame animation or in your target frame for your animation simulation. So that's all. I hope I could give you a few more helpful hints and show you how to get started with your DragonWraith. So I wish you happy rendering and bye until the next time.